we got to talk about Norwalk Records, legendary record shop. And not only that, they morphed into a record label later on in the 90s when I started being familiar with them.
Wow.
Yeah, they had a couple. They had Norwalk's Most Wanted. It was obviously
I knew some guys from Norwalk's Most Wanted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
no
totally.
shit, huh?
Yeah,
I remember that tape.
Watakami, yeah.
I remember that tape specifically.
I got that tape. I live in Phoenix now, and I got that tape in Phoenix at a record store.
Damn,
like,
they
I
were
seen
big.
it here in Phoenix. Yeah, they were tight.
That's crazy. Talk to us about Norwalk Records. What you remember, man? Like anything, just any story, anything you remember about Norwalk Records.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I used to just go in there just like anybody else back then and just go through all the albums. One of the big deals at Norwalk Records was Teen Angel magazines. And then also all these mixtapes they would have, right? They would have tapes that were like these volumes. I'm not even sure they were legal back then, but it would say like,
no, they were all bootlegs.
Yeah, there would be like, it would be the real songs, but it would be like hip hop something volume 1, volume 2. And so you'd get a lot of cuts that were from different groups, like Ghetto Boys, different shit that I'd never heard. You know what I mean? Some good, a lot bad. But, we'd buy these tapes, filter through them, find out which ones that were good. And then a lot of times back then I was making just my own tapes off a double cassette. Once you got a double cassette, then you could like start just making your own tapes and giving them out and shit. You know what I mean? Keep making the love tapes too, slow jam tapes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Norwalk Records, to me, the biggest thing they did there was sell those mixtapes, man. Homie's Favorite Soul. I mean, there's oldie ones of, volumes of oldies, volumes of hip hop. All that shit was great. I mean, I used to go there when it was, I think it was on Front Street originally, and it was an old bank that was at the time was broke down, like the ceiling was busted. We're talking like in the 80s and shit. And then eventually they moved over onto what used to be like Norwalk Twin Cinema area. Yeah,
it's a Pioneer Shoemaker one.
I think it was Pioneer, but I could be wrong. But originally they were on Front Street at some abandoned bank that they bought or something. Yeah, Norwalk Records was a shit, man. Like, and the Teen Angel magazine. That's what like the first seeing homeboys like all throughout LA. You know what I mean? Those magazines, like I couldn't even believe those existed. To have homies writing from prison, trying to get girls, and guys that do bad graffiti and cholo poetry. And
I forgot about those magazines. Now that you say that, damn.
Teen Angel, bro. Like those are. I look them up every once in a while just because I'm like, I wonder if they still make these things. They probably don't because they don't want to promote cholo shit. But back then that was the first time I ever seen guys from the north, like from North Daniels and shit. Which my ex-wife is from up north, and I remember when I first met her, I go, man, you guys can't write for shit. Because I would see guys that were posting the pictures of their hood up there, and the gang graffiti in LA is something special. You know what I mean? Like I used to practice those letters. Those homies really know how to get down and shit. You know what I mean? But sometimes I see the guys up north, they kind of look a little hickish. You know what I mean? A little, maybe the graffiti wasn't so good. But we're talking the 80s. People weren't really super up on it yet. But LA was fine tuned as far as like, how it goes, man. I don't know how much graffiti is there now because I go back to Norwalk every once in a while and it seems a little calm. You know what I mean? Like it seems a lot
of tagging, less good graffiti like we remember coming up. But yeah, definitely the tagging is still just out of control, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was doing graffiti, but I was kind of doing more gang graffiti. I was practicing some hip hop graffiti back in the day, but I was just not as good as I knew some guys that were really badass that would do pieces in the riverbed. And I don't know if you ever remember that, but
of course,
early in the days, the hip hop guys used to do big burners in the riverbed, which are pretty badass. We don't have trains like New York, but we got plenty of
riverbeds. Yep.
Yeah.
Spent plenty of time in the riverbed in Bell Gardens in Bell, that little area right there.
Yeah, dude. And then, writing on buses all day, but just practicing letters all the time. I mean, every hit up I'd see from guys from Norwalk or Neighbor or Carmelas, I was like CFC I liked or A, you know what I mean? I'm like up just practicing all the time. I mean, that's part of the culture too, as far as hip hop, like graffiti, breakdancing and, just the music itself, we were on to that shit big time. We like really took it to heart, and also like, we wanted to spread it because we loved it, like, At first, our parties were, they were legit. Like we had DJs, we had, like we had some DJs like Battle Cat, which was like a guy that like we all knew, but he was older than us, and he was already throwing parties. So we kind of like piggybacked off him, and then we had some rappers and shit, But somewhere along like the late '80s, mid to late '80s, it just started getting violent. Where you couldn't throw. We were throwing parties. Yeah, well, the gangbang at that time, I know a lot of maybe the gangbanging hit. Peak in the 90s, but
92 we were at the worst. But yeah, from 88, 89, 90, it was building up to crazy where you go to a party and it was most likely getting shot up.
yeah, I would just remember going to parties in other cities, and I was didn't know any better. You go to these parties, you end up in some neighborhood, you don't even know where. You kind of know it's dark, and sometimes you go in there and you might see some graffiti on the wall. Like, where the fuck are we at? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is Hardin. It's like,
yeah.
I never even heard of Hardin before. You know what I mean? Like Jimtown. I remember going to a neighborhood called Jimtown. I think it's either a Pico or fucking Whittier. Yeah. And it was like one way in and one way out. It looked like the worst neighborhood I'd ever seen. I was like, why the fuck are we throwing a party here? It's like, who the fuck set this shit up? You know what I mean? And so a lot of times at the end, we'd get into shit with guys, plus we had, all kinds of different races with us. And, yeah, it got bad at the end. Yeah. I left Norwalk in '89 just because it got so hot, like just too much shit going on.
Mm. Yeah, let's go back to graffiti and tagging. See, I started tagging in the early '90s, and by then, unfortunately, all the tagging crews had started to add a 13 to their name. So I only stayed in it for a quick minute. But can you talk to us about what you remember about, and maybe who some of the big writers were back then? But what do you remember about tagging and graffiti in the '80s in LA?
As far as tagging, like I don't think it was super popular in Norwalk then. It was more of like a LA thing, like a downtown LA thing. I mean, there was probably taggers there, but they definitely didn't have any crews. Like when I left in '89, I don't remember really knowing any tagging crews. Some of the hip hop crews or like some of the party crews like that, we would do hip hop graffiti. Like I used to ride on all the Norwalk transit buses, but it was more all 8-ball posse shit, and it was party group stuff, like pretty kind of like free promotion for us, you know what I mean? And then eventually I would do big burners in the neighborhood. Like, so that picture that you seen on Facebook, there was a neighborhood that we used to hang out in, off of Patterson, like by Patterson Square and not far from the city hall, where a lot of guys used to live there. And it was officially like peaceful Vada Norwalk, but they really weren't all that big at the time. Norwalk? Yeah, it's like fucking right down the street from Patterson Square.
Yeah, still there.
Yeah, and like that picture I took, there's a church that used to be right there, and like I was trippy that somebody was like, "Oh, I used to live in those apartments back there." Dude, I didn't realize how much people like would respond to that. Like I post that picture on Facebook for my regular just family and friends, and they all get it. They get that era, but I couldn't believe how many people responded and remembered that era because I think people just kind of forgot about it. You know what I mean? Like it's to me, it's a valuable. Like I wish somebody would make a movie about that era.
Dude.
I mean, I thought plenty of times of writing a book about this. I wrote and published a couple poetry books, but I've always thought about writing a book about this era. I even have a title called Smog Not Fog, but I just have never put pen. You know what I mean? I've never even got started other than just thinking about it and like crazy like. But as far as the graffiti, yeah, like it was more gang graffiti back then. And I hit up at one time or another. I hit up a whole area, like on that Patterson area. I mean, like we were having a lot of problems with the police, and this is probably something I shouldn't have done back in the day. But I wrote a big old 8-ball posse and put one time stay out, and we had some fucking serious problems after that. They were not going for it, But also, I had tagged up the whole fucking neighborhood, with the 8-ball posse shit. And I was at work one night. I used to work at LaFell. I don't know if you ever heard of that place before. There was like a fucking factory right outside of Norwalk, Santa Fe Springs.
Okay.
And I was reading the press telegram, the Norwalk paper, the local news, and I'm reading, somebody hit up between Patterson and blah, 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 the 7-Eleven. And I'm reading, holy shit, this is me. This is all about me. You know what I mean? Like, holy fuck. They had a town meeting at the church there. It was all about gang graffiti. They had the gang graffiti people that removed the graffiti, and social workers and police, and we got to go in there and watch it. And they had all my shit that I did up on the wall, like So yeah, but things, you're breaking the law. You know what I mean? Like it's all fun and games until you get busted. You know what I mean?